welcome. We see everybody lining up. We've got a full turnout today. Happy to see this. Welcome to Teach for the Culture. I know that many people are interested in this topic, so I'm happy to see that you've popped into the room so that we can have this discussion today. It's going to be a really fantastic discussion. And so I am not going to be very long. My name is Kalando Wilmoth. For those of you who probably were not a part of the session yesterday, I am the Managing Director for Verb Communication, one of the partners for this virtual summit. Very happy to work alongside Dr. Rattray on all her projects. We've been working together for a while on these brilliant ideas. And so today, as you know, day 2, this is our first concurrent session, and we're happy to have everyone join us. So in this Zoom chat, we're going to be having a great discussion being led by Dr. Saran Stewart, Associate Professor, Higher Education and Student Affairs and Director of Global Education at the University of Connecticut. She is a former Senior Lecturer of Comparative Higher Education and the Deputy Dean for the Faculty of Humanities and Education at the University of the West Indies Mona campus. So, you know, she knows her people. She's a Salzburg Global Fellow and the recipient of multiple awards, including the 2019 Vice Chancellor Award for Excellence from the University of the West Indies and the 2018 African Diaspora Emerging Scholar awarded by the Comparative and International Education Society. At the core of her research, Dr. Stewart examines issues in comparative education, decolonizing methodologies, post-colonial theories, critical and inclusive pedagogy, and access and equity issues in higher education. Ladies and gentlemen, I am happy to welcome Dr. Stewart and the fantastic panel for our topic this morning. Dr. Stewart, over to you.
Thank you so much, Kalando, for having me and that great and gracious introduction. Hi, everyone. I see that some of my students have chimed into this board and some of my colleagues and stuff. So I'm very happy to see so many familiar names in the board. Just some netiquette approaches, okay, is that we have close to 100 persons that's going to be in the room. And we want to get to as many questions as possible. At the Q&A section of the time, we are controlling your microphones, not me, so don't cuss me off. But we have a beautiful colleague of ours working with us. Her name is Kamiko. Or I'll ask her to unmute the mics at that time in different sections. In the meantime, however, if you have questions that are popping up, I'm going to try my best to monitor the chat room. And so please post your questions into the chat room. So good morning and blessings, everyone. I truly hope that you are all safe and keeping well. I know that if some of you are in Jamaica and throughout the Caribbean, we just experienced Tropical Storm Laura, and she gave us a whole heap of flooding waters and stuff like that yesterday. And so my thoughts, of course, are with you. And thank you for, joining us and everything like that. We are going through some spikes in the Caribbean with a surge in COVID-19 cases. And this is an opportune time to kind of get with us and talk with us because we're experiencing this in real time with you. And so I wanted to set that kind of pace and context that so happy to have you join us, especially given the current context, the climate of uncertainty and everything that is happening. Truly hope that you and your families are staying healthy and as well as can be. All right. With all of that said, I'm going to share my screen very quickly with all of us. And there won't be a whole heap of screen sharing, by the way. Okay, I'm just doing 3 quick slides just to introduce you to this wonderful panel of boss ladies, as I've started to call them, and then to kind of set the agenda as well as set the context for what we're going to discuss. Okay, so first and foremost, we have Miss Shauna Brown, Dr. Nicole Grimes, and Miss Keisha Rattray with us on the panel, and you're going to hear from all 3. Ms. Shauna Brown is the CEO and founder of Teach for the Culture and assistant principal for the very esteemed Academy for Aerospace and Engineering School in Windsor, Connecticut. Ms. Keisha Rattray is the Director of Program Strategy and Delivery at the New Teachers Center, a national organization whose mission is to disrupt the predictability of educational inequities for systemically underserved students from preschool through high school by accelerating educator effectiveness. Keisha provides oversight to NTC's teacher induction and school leadership programs in the New York metro area, as well as a Transformational Leadership Collaborative, a program designed to support the development of a pipeline of promising, aspiring principals in Brooklyn and the Bronx. Dr. Nicole Grimes is the proud alumna of the Graduate Center of the City University of New York, CUNY, where she received a PhD in urban education with a concentration in mathematics, science, and technology. She's an education consultant, professional development workshop leader, and speaker. She is a former New York City high school principal. She has been a fervent STEM activist, I would call her, an educator for 18 plus years, working with the public and private and charter sectors in schooling. So welcome, 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 boss ladies. All right, for our audience, your agenda for this morning is that I will set the context, which I will do in the next slide. Each of the panelists will give opening remarks for about 10 minutes based on varying questions that they have been asked to prepare for us. I have also set them different questions, and based on their talks, I will ask them another set of questions, and then we'll leave about 20 minutes or so for question and answers by the audience. Okay, sounds good? And as I said before, please have your Q&As, your questions in particular, and any comments, to be quite honest with you, flowing through the chat room, and I will interject as many as possible, but not to interrupt our panelists, okay? The core outcomes that we're trying to look at is that we recognize, we had asked Dr. Rattray before, who would culturally relevant strategies and processes that we can take to our own schools or own institutions in order to apply them, okay? And as I mentioned, and keep on mentioning, please use that chat function. All right, so what context are we in? Frightening times. So essentially, I have one slide to kind of grapple over the last 5 to 6 months. On March 10th, 2020, I'm going to focus on Jamaica because I just left home flying through a pandemic and relocating last month. And so as of March 10, 2020, Jamaica declared its first positive case of COVID-19. As of March 13th, all schools were closed, and to remain closed then until September the 7th. But according to the Ministry of Education report, 600,000 students in approximately 3,639 public and private educational institutions from early childhood to tertiary have been impacted. And in the Caribbean, it is projected that the inequality gap will widen as it pertains to the advantaged versus the disadvantaged students and young persons. So the government's responses have ranged from providing remote learning training for teachers, distributing smart devices, lobbying with private sector, Digicel, Flow, in particular, internet companies for reduced cost data plans and zero-rated websites so that we can continue to have teaching and learning. So the teachers can deliver through various modalities. Our teachers and our principals have worked tirelessly. They have delivered televised radio lessons, internet, WhatsApp videos, Zoom sessions, they're zoomed out, Google Meet, you name it. However, with significant social inequities, roughly 30,000 of our students in Jamaica alone, I'm naming, remain unreached throughout the period. And then the quality of teaching and learning being received and reciprocated varies significantly, further widening the inequity gaps. Between the periods of June 8th to July 3rd, Secondary schools reopened, however, to accommodate the lost learning between grades 11 and 13. And so that students could start to sit their regional CXC exams, CSEC exams, and CAPE exams starting July 27th. In some cases, though, there have been no televisions available for students to access the televised lessons from teachers, and teachers are left burnt out and exhausted from an unrelenting end of the last Easter term into summer term, and let's be honest, the entire summer as well. So some students also reside in unstable living conditions and make it difficult for them to learn, or where caregivers just cannot stay home and provide the necessary attention and assistance with completing tasks, unmuting those microphones or muting those microphones and completing their assignments. So while some private schools will open up on September the 7th, all public schools are slated in Jamaica to remain closed until October the 5th. And where we have spoken about the tensions and the challenges with our teachers and our principals and our institutions, there are many challenges and traumatic events being faced by each of the categories of educational stakeholders across the Caribbean. And you will hear from our panelists that they see that, they recognize that, they are currently dealing with that within their own context and are going to shed light on some of the things in order to leave us more empowered and impacted about what we can do based on what we currently already have. So I'm going to stop share the screen and I'm going to ask Dr. Grimes to set us off with her opening remarks. I'm going to also time her for about 10 minutes. And Dr. Grimes, I will come back on and give you like a 3-minute warning, a 1-minute warning, just like we keep on track with time.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for that lovely introduction and setting us on the right course this morning, Dr. Stewart. My name, as you all can see, is Dr. Grimes. I'm hailing to you right now from Brooklyn, New York. And as Dr. Saran has pointed out in terms of my biography, I also want to add, I am a proud primary and secondary school educated Trinidad-born citizen, and then went on to be educated here in the United States, then to become a classroom teacher and a school principal and now a consultant. So that's important for me to say because I want to make sure that you're understanding that everything that I share today, this is the lens from which I'm going to be speaking to you from being both a student and product of the Caribbean and the United States education system. I want to give a big shout out to all of the school leaders and teachers here right now logged in, because it's so important for us to, embrace the power of professional development and recognize we constantly need to be asking ourselves as practitioners, how do our experiences, right, our own schooling experiences and our experiences so far in the classroom, how are they affecting the way that we, our teaching mindsets, our approaches and the way that we think about teaching and learning. It's such an important endeavor. So kudos to you all for being here right now. In these incredibly, I guess, unsettling transitional times in education, I want everyone to embrace the fact that we're here right now in a space where we should be feeling very excited and encouraged about all the great things that we can do that we might not have been able to do before. But it starts with this lens of having empathy for each other as, practitioners, as school leaders, and some of you even as parents yourself of school-age children, right? So I want to kind of like lead us off in a discussion about how are we being more empathetic and compassionate about our teaching, and how are we tweaking our practice in light of all the craziness that's happening right now in education globally. Really and truly. So I want to start off by talking about just actually helping us define what is empathy, right? So empathy is really seeing with the eyes of another, hearing with the ears of another, and feeling the way that somebody else is feeling. Typically, when we talk or think about being empathetic towards another, like a student, we think about what's called affective empathy, which is you see somebody or a child is sad, so you feel sad. You feel sad to kind of mirror their actions. But there's also really another important kind of empathy, which is called cognitive empathy, which is us really stretching ourselves to understand and put ourselves in the shoes of another to understand why they are feeling the way that they're feeling. So the why piece is important. Now, why am I talking about empathy? Because empathy really should be defining the way that we are teaching and leading in our schools and our classrooms, right? We have to have an open mind to just new ways of thinking, new avenues of instruction, and really being sensitive to the time and the context right now. Why empathy? Well, first of all, we cannot expect to have an intellectual impact on our young people if we are not having an emotional impact, right? We are not involved in their emotional development as young people. The truth is our kids are at their highest capacity, you know, when they're comfortable and they feel safe and they're happy. And it's our responsibility, no matter how we might want to kind of push back against that and think, no, that's the role for our guidance counselor, whatever. No, we are in the same way as we are intellectually tasked, we are emotionally tasked with nurturing, you know, young people in our midst. Because when you think about empathy and you think about it, it's really forcing you to consider not just what you're seeing and feeling, but here's a big part. It's forcing you to consider the things that you're not seeing. And because your kids are not in front of you, will not be in front of you for a few more months, you know, possibly, you have to think about what are the struggles and the trauma and the other things that are happening in their lives. So as much as we remain so dedicated to our curriculum and we're like, we know what we're teaching and we have to consider these things. Here are the things that are happening and have been happening with our young people right now. They are experiencing home instability. Some of them might be going through, you know, hunger, depression. They might have a lack of technology and resources at their disposal. They might be in homes where there's emotional and physical abuse that's rampant. There might be not privy to special education resources. They might not be privy to social, emotional, and counseling support services. They may be experiencing or dealing with grief because they've lost a family member due to COVID or other reasons. And they might be, and you better believe this, they are more than likely experiencing grief to losing really important school experiences and friendships, etc. So our children are dealing with a lot right now, as we are, right? So imagine all of the feelings that you may be feeling as an educator. Our children are experiencing those, and they are not as equipped as we are to deal with the challenges of life in that particular way. So what I want to share with you guys today in the brief time that I have left is 6 easy strategies, 6 ways for school leaders, teachers to just develop a much more empathetic stance, you know, as we start to get ready for this new school year and move into the school year and beyond remote learning, even when you return to the classroom, you know. So the first thing I want us to all consider, number 1, is we have to create a no judgment zone, right? We have to check ourselves. We are all coming into the classroom with implicit biases. We look at certain children, the way they may be dressed, the way they may be kept, or whatnot, and we're making assumptions about their abilities, their potential, and their interest in learning, and we cannot do that. We cannot do that. We have to stop. It's so easy to jump to conclusions, you know, about a situation, especially involving what you're not seeing. So we have to step back and consider, what more do I need to learn and consider and understand about the situation before I make a judgment about any child? And the truth of the matter, the only judgment that we should be making about our children is that each person in here, in my room, is capable of learning and doing great, amazing things under my leadership. That's the only judgment that should be passed on. So number 1, again, create a no judgment zone. Number 2, my teachers and school leaders, it is so important to incorporate and have emotional check-ins. So what do I mean? We need to do virtual temperature checks, as I like to call them. So when you start a class or you're starting a workshop with other, you know, school leaders, you know, you could do a 2-word check-in. Ask everybody to say, give me a word to describe how you're feeling. You know, you could do that with your students as well. Or you could do the really simple thumbs up, sideways, or down. Right now, I want everyone to give me a temperature check. Drop in the chat, you know, a word to describe how you're feeling right now this morning. Or you could do the thumbs up or sideways if you're on a, you know, on a device, and you could use your little emojis. All right. You could start off your class or end the class with a good things kickoff, like I like to call it. So you ask every child to say, you know, one good thing in my life right now, or one good thing, you know, happened today, or one good thing happened this week. So, you know, do a nice little good thing check-in, you know, with your faculty, with your students. And make sure you're creating informal time to chat. It's okay to have informal conversations with our children. I know this does not happen a lot in our schools back home. I'm a product of it, I know. It's like you're the teacher, I'm the student, and there's like this huge division, and you're not supposed to ever know who I am as a person. And I'm sorry, even though that's the way that we were educated and reared in the classroom, that's not necessarily the way to go. This is all about relationship building and trust building. So create space to have informal conversations with your kids. And if you do have access to technology, go ahead and post a little sheet with tips about how to cope with emotions. You know, if you have a little Google Classroom or whatever, have like a document that your kids can always access about how to, you know, cope and deal with things that are happening in time. You can lean on your school counselor leadership for that information if you don't feel equipped in that regard. All right, so number 3, we're moving on to embrace the space. Embrace the space. And what I mean by that is you have to be flexible. We all have to be flexible. Listen, this standard 7-8 hour day, right? And we think we're gonna just convert that into some kind of remote schedule. I have a surprise for all of you. It's not going to work. It's not going to work at all. You have to be patient, you know? It's not the end of the world if, to start off with, if something happens while you're engaging with a child through your phone or the Zoom, whatever, if the little brother run on the screen, if your own kid run on the screen, it's not the end of the world. Nobody needs detention. Nobody needs some kind of, you know, to get in trouble. It's not that serious. You understand? So 1, you're not expecting students to remain glued to the screen all day long. Don't expect your teachers to do it, and give yourself the same grace. So schedule time to talk to your students and their parents, and through the phone or email them, all right? Strong relationships are extremely critical to student success during this time. Take the time to maintain those relationships as much as you can. Secondly, you have to schedule time for you to take breaks. Go for a walk, drink some coffee, make a personal call, you know, play with your pet. You have to have that same grace and empathy with yourself as well. And also extend that same grace to students. So let them get a little water break, let them stretch, get up, stand up, or maybe a little quick scavenger hunt. Everybody have 30 seconds to go and grab something white from, you know, that's a school supply. Anything, just a little activity to break up the monotony, get some blood flowing, and realize, like, listen, the kids are expected to be taking in so much information for hours and hours and hours every day. So have some grace for that. Number 4, I'm speeding through time now. You have to participate yourself and use self-disclosure. What do I mean by that? When you're asking, for example, about how your students are feeling, to share an adjective that describes the emotions, you do it too. You lead the session and say, today Miss So-and-so is feeling blah, 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 or you give your thumbs up. You give and share a personal story, you know, to hopefully have your students, you know, connect with the point you're trying to make. We have to break down this barrier that in order to be an effective teacher, you cannot be, you know, personal, and you cannot share things about your personal life. You are a human being, first and foremost. So we have to like rid ourselves of that notion and that old dated way of like having this rigidity with our students. Number 5, we have to communicate using the right words. I'm going to probably, you know, push a little button with some people here, but we have to stop the yelling. We have to stop the buffing. We have to stop using intimidating language, right? We have to stop thinking that being in control and in charge and having authority means people need to be scared when you talk. Please throw that through the window. We need to replace all of that, what I just mentioned, with much more compassion. Right? When you're talking to your students and you ask questions that are not yes or no questions, ask open-ended questions and repeat back to them what you think you've heard. And say things like, it sounds like you might be, I hear that what I hear you saying is XYZ. We want to be very careful with the way that we are talking to our children. All right? Again, A lot of research says we tend to teach the way that we were taught. And because a lot of us brights, we think that that way was the right way. But the truth is, there are a lot better ways to approach teaching and learning that we are products of. So let's flip it and throw all that nonsense through the window. Stop with the intimidating talk and language and scaring children. I could tell you all the 45 teachers that scared the bejesus out of me in my primary and secondary school days. And I was a straight A student. Why was that necessary? Why? Did that make me learn better and become brighter? Absolutely not. It just made me not like a whole bunch of teachers, but do my work, you know? So we need to stop that. And last but not least, this is number 6. We need to maintain expectations, but be practical. And I think a lot of teachers and school leaders are continue to struggle with this. What does that mean? I had a teacher, for example, who, when we first switched to virtual learning here in New York, he was so focused on how he was going to become and maintain, you know, this like rigid schedule and giving students a lot of work. He was so concerned about rigor, you know, and guess what? After a few weeks in, half the students were not doing well and they just disappeared. They weren't doing school work. So what do I mean by have expectations and maintain them, but be practical? You can still be empathetic and you can still validate what a child might be going through, but still empathetically reinforce, listen, you have a lot of potential. I believe in you. Okay, turn in this homework assignment 2 days later, we'll work it out, whatever, right? You can still be flexible, understanding, but reinforce that you have high expectations for your students. They can coexist. It's just because you're flexible and you push a little deadline and you say, okay, instead of doing this paper or do this PowerPoint presentation, instead of making the changes and thinking that you're doing something wrong, recognize what you're doing is you're being empathetic with your students, and that is how they're going to continue to thrive and build trust with you, and this relationship will continue. And overall, to wrap up, like, these approaches are not going to only enhance, the way that you teach and your ability to do your work in the classroom, but you're going to have tools to basically foster a much better, much more enhanced, classroom with your students. We've been all experiencing this rush of emotions, and they're all natural and they're all normal. And hold space to feel all of those emotions. They're all valid, but recognize your students, hold them too. And we're going into a new year with hopefully a renewed mindset, and we're going to take some of these tools, and really try to put them to practice. And remember, we're all in this together. I know every teacher, I've never met a teacher who did not think they were the greatest teacher on the planet. But again, if we, are fervent about creating lifelong learners in our classrooms, we have to be married to that, that perspective as well. We are all lifelong learners and we're here learning together. And I hope that something that I shared today that you guys can take away and utilize in your respective schools. I'm actually going to share a file in the chat with all of the tips. It's just our overview of the presentation so everyone can access it, so you don't have to feel like if you miss anything, and just have it there, refer to it whenever you can. And lastly, I want to say thanks to all the educators in here. I'm very, very happy and excited that, you felt that it was important to be right here in this moment, because we're doing things differently, okay? Every single day, we're empowering ourselves to learn how to teach good and lead good. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Dr. Grimes, and in particular for those 6 strategies, which we will revisit in the question section. It was phenomenal. Please put it in the chat, and if you look up through your chat, Dr. Grimes, you're gonna see all the thumbs up and all of the blessed and feeling energized, and so thank you for that very much. All right, Mrs. Rattray, you ready? All right, so up next we have Mrs. Keisha Rattray to give her 10 minutes opening remarks. But go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Grimes, for sharing all of that with us, those 6 strategies. First of all, I want to say I am a proud Jamaican, first-generation Caribbean American, daughter of Sonia, who was born and raised in Falmouth, Trelawney, and Victor, proud Kingstonian, born in Jubilee Hospital. My mom came to New York City in the middle of the winter with $56 in her pocket. And she instilled in me from a very early age the value of community and collaboration. In fact, she made sure that I understood that they were indeed necessary for survival. I would often hear her say things like, no man is an island, and one hand washes the other. And this was further illustrated as my Puerto Rican super, who was my next door neighbor, kept an eye out on my brother and I when my mother went to work, or my Arab American shopkeeper, Mike, and my mother's friend, Miss Mary, watched me as I boarded the school bus in the mornings. And then at church, where I met my mentor, who is now 62 years old. So we were a part of a community that was outside of our immediate family. And so today I want to talk to you a little bit about community and collaboration. And as a facilitator of adult learning, I know that sometimes the answers are basically in the room, right? You are the experts of your context. So my approach here is really to ask a series of questions and begin to prompt your thinking. So when we think about community and collaboration in this current context, we have to look at all of the ways that we can deliberately create connections for ourselves and our students. And what I invite everyone to do as we're looking toward the new school year and we're thinking about this idea of community and collaboration is to really set an intention for it. Because if we set an intention for how we will collaborate, how we will be in community with one another, then we can pay attention to it. So set an intention, pay an attention to it, and then set the time to be able to reflect on how it is that you're doing with that thing or those things that you set an intention around. So as Dr. Grimes alluded to, if you are a teacher, obviously you know you are a professional learner. We are professional learners. And as we think about this, I think I go back to what my mom would say about no man or woman is an island. So since we're all teachers in this current context, we have to come with the recognition and a little bit of grace for ourselves. This is the first time that we're ever doing something like this. We are being tasked with something that we've never been asked to do before. And so how are we creating space for us to be able to engage with other teachers around what it is that they're doing? So whether or not you're a first-year teacher or this is your 20th year teaching, how can we come together knowing that we're all first-year teachers in this context? What skills or tools or resources do you have that others can benefit from? You know, if there was a training that you engaged in, how might you be able to share that training with a teacher, another teacher? Are there promising practices that you have around your content or your pedagogy that you might be able to use to support another colleague? What relationships might you be able to broker for the teacher in the next grade? How am I really showing up for others? And as we think about this idea of community with our students, how are we inviting our students or our children to co-create their learning spaces? What are the things that we know about them? How is that reflected in our curriculum? So we know that we have these canonical texts that often we need to refer to as we're teaching, but have we read something new, some new young adult literature, some new primary school literature that really reflects the current context of our children? Because that is what is culturally responsive, right? Understanding where our children are, the current cultural context, and then showing them how that shows up in the curriculum, and being aware of places it needs to come out in the curriculum. What do we know about our kids? What are their likes? What are their dislikes? Have we done an inventory? Have we listened to them? Have we created spaces for them to be able to have conversations with us? How does this curriculum, again, really reflect who they are as people? When we think about this idea of collaboration, are we creating spaces for our children to be able to connect with each other? Are we in our Zoom classrooms or Google classrooms? Do we have breakout rooms where they can share their ideas? When they come to our classrooms, are they able to co-create the space in that they can create their own backgrounds for Zoom so that they're bringing a little bit of themselves even into that virtual space? So it's really important that we're thinking about how are we not just collaborating with each other as teachers, as adults, as families, as students, but also how are we collaborating with the children who we are tasked with leading and caring for throughout the year. Something else that I am thinking about is this idea of community. Although we are, you are all in the Caribbean, the world really through this virtual space has gotten a lot smaller. There are opportunities now, instead of flying someone into the island, there are opportunities for us to be able to reach out to persons outside of our current context and invite them into our classrooms. Can we bring someone in who's going to share with our students about their profession, about what they do, about how that particular thing connects to the curriculum that you're teaching? So what is it that we can do to create this idea or this sense of further advancing community in our current context? How are we introducing other people who may be a part of the current community into it? Are we inviting them to come in and speak to our classrooms? Are we allowing them to share the skills that they have to be able to advance our students? Because this is not about creating, children just to be unto themselves. Children, we are all wired, not just children, we are all wired for connection. So how are we making sure that even in these spaces, when they're in these at home, that they are also feeling that sense of connectedness to one another? So these are some things that we can begin to start, to do so that we can ensure that we are creating this sense of community amongst our children. Lastly, I would say even for as teachers, something that I think is really important. If you have an intention around collaboration, around community, it's important that you yourself become somewhat of an expert in that thing. So what text are you reading to advance your practice? How are you engaging in that text with other people, creating that learning community so that you can reflect on your practice? I've heard so many stories about the persistence of the teachers in the islands in regards to kids who have not been able to have access to technology, teachers themselves who have not been able to have access to technology. Are there other ways that we can connect with each other? I think it's really important for us to be able to think about and think through. So I've asked a few questions. I want you to be able to think about those things. I want you to be able to ensure that you, as the experts of your current context, can take some of those questions and apply them to your particular classroom, your area of expertise, your current context, and ensure that you can use those things. So again, how are we collaborating? How are we setting an intention to do collaboration and community? How are we setting the time to be able to engage in that work? And how are we giving attention to those things that are most important for connecting our students to the world bigger than themselves, to connect our students to our curriculum, which is going to support them in their learning, in accelerating their learning. And so I thank you so much for that.
Thank you so much, Keisha Rattray. I appreciate that. I think when I heard you speak, and we'll get to it in the Q&A session, and I want the audience to really think about it, is this generation intermix, interplay that is happening, right? It's this switch in terms of the dynamics, because I remember when I was training on March 10th, when we had the first case, I was actually in Trinidad because I had to go work with the CARFA group for the public health, where we're discussing the whole COVID, right? And at that time, Trinidad didn't even have one case as yet. By the time I left on March 13th, we had one case. And that, as we landed in Norman Manley, because the fear was that we're going to get stuck in Trinidad, which is not a bad place, eh? But I really wanted to get home to my children. And we landed and we heard, pick up the children, school closed. By Monday morning, everybody was scrambling. All right, what are we going to do? Some were able to pivot, as we've been hearing that word, and get on to the next training. And then some of us had to do the training. I was a part of that team of training teachers on how to then move to the online learning, as we have children at home right now. And so we'll discuss more about that in the question and answer as we try to figure out this generational interplay, but using community and collaboration to help us. And I love a babysitter right now as well. All right, without further ado, Shauna Brown, please take over. We'll give you the opening remarks. You have 10 minutes as well.
All right, thank you so much, everyone, and good morning, good morning, good morning. I am very glad to be here. As Dr. Stewart said, my name is Shauna Brown. I'm the founder of Teach for the Culture, LLC, which is a consulting firm as well as a brand. And I'm also an assistant principal at the Academy of Aerospace and Engineering in Windsor. It's what we call a magnet school, so we have students coming from all over Connecticut. I am also a proud Jamaican American. Was born in Jamaica, but I left there when I was young. And so I've been here. I went to school here in the States, but my mother and father, both from Kingston. My mother was a teacher in Jamaica for many years before migrating here. And so I am very, very, very excited to be here. So I want to talk a little bit today about creativity and innovation and the opportunity that we have right now to make a difference in education and to move us forward. But before I start, I'd like to do a quick icebreaker. And I would like for you all to drop in the chat and tell me how many years have you been in education? So whether you're a teacher, a school leader, whether you're studying to be a teacher, please tell us in the chat how many years you have in education right now. All right, so we have 13, 21, 25, 7, 23, 14. Wow. So a big range. So far we have between 1 and 28 years. 30 years, I think that's the highest so far. So great, 40 years, 33, 15, 11. Wow, so we have some really, I mean, oh, as you see, a broad range of numbers in terms of time that we've been in education together. And so if we were to put all of those together, we probably have over 400 years combined in education. All right, way over that, looking at these numbers. But guess what? As we come back this year, as someone mentioned earlier, we are all first-year teachers. Show of hands, who has come back to a school year like this in their lifetime? No one. We have not been in this moment in history in our lifetime or in the world. We have not. So as we're coming back, we have a great opportunity. Yes, there has been a lot of loss, and unfortunately we are in the midst of a pandemic, but we are at a crossroads and we have an opportunity to change and to make a difference right now. It's probably the greatest opportunity we have had like this in our lifetime, to be able to make this kind of difference and to make these kinds of changes in education. And so again, I want to talk about, creativity and innovation and what that may look like for us as we move forward into this very new time of an exciting opportunity, right? So I know there's a lot of stress around, students not having access and people not being able to get on, and that's very real. But I want us to look at the opportunity that this moment in time is presenting for us right now. And I want us to embrace that paradigm shift that we're going through. All right. So, so first of all, again, we have the opportunity to be better and to better prepare our youth to thrive in the 21st century. Never before have we asked for so many youth and for so many educators to be able to pivot, to move online, and to deliver an instruction in a way that has not been done before on such a wide scale. We had that opportunity now. Many of you saw beginning in March that we had to learn new things. And so in this time, we're not just teachers, but we are teachers and learners. And we have to also embrace that as well. Right? We have the opportunities, as Ms. Rattray spoke about earlier, it's for collaboration and increased collaboration. And that doesn't just mean collaboration with each other, with other educators and other teachers, but that's also collaboration with students, with families, with people from across industries. We've had to, many of you have become familiar with new platforms such as Zoom or Google Classrooms and other things. And again, there's an opportunity here for us to collaborate, not just within education, not just within teachers, but across industries and across different levels of stakeholders in education, right? And so all of these things that we're going into and we're moving into, it's unprecedented times, as we've said before. And so it calls for unprecedented measures. All right. So how are we going to use this opportunity to approach teaching and learning, and how are we pivoting? Some things to think about, I would encourage everyone to think about. One is the way that we assess learning, right? In the traditional sense, we assign a task and then students hand in work. Or we provide a unit of study, and at the end of the unit, students take an exam. How are we going to rethink that? How is that going to look different within this time and within this context? And also just looking at what was the value that we were getting out of that kind of testing and that kind of method? Was that the best way to ensure or to see what our students are learning and capable of? Or is that just the way we've always done it? Another thing I think we need to look at is the relevance. How are we providing students with an education that is relevant to their needs right now and to the needs of the future, right? Right now, there's nobody would have predicted that we'd be in this place, right? In the world, in this moment in August 2020. We would not have predicted it. 5 years from now, it may be a different situation, a different case. Preferably it's not a pandemic, but something else where we're gonna need new solutions to new problems. And so our task is gonna be to prepare students to be able to solve problems and solve problems that are not even in existence yet, right? Through technology, through all kinds of problem solving. So we have to prepare them to be thinking in that way, right? Also, I think we need to look at more student voice and including student voice in our classrooms, all right? So a lot of us grew up in a day where, they say children are to be seen and not heard, right? Where the children's role is just to sit down and be quiet and not to say anything. We have to shift from that. Today, it's a day and age where we have to be able to hear from students, include their student voices, and even they can help us with what we're going through right now, right? A lot of us, for the first time, began to video chat. Some of our youth, they've been doing that. They've been in the group chats, they've been in all kind of, they've been doing that. And so we have to hear from them as to what ways can we best address their needs. We have to hear from them in terms of what is important to them, how they're feeling about their learning. And that may even include taking a survey. How many times have you, as a either elementary or secondary teacher or primary school teacher, asked your students, is this helpful for you? Or is this the way that, is this way that I'm instructing you, helping you to learn or understand the content better? We have to be asking those questions and for them to help us help them even better. All right, and I talked about the integration of technology before and industry partnerships, all those things. We just have to think about education in a totally different way. All right. Another question to ask ourselves during this time is, how are we building on the brilliance that the students automatically bring with them? Every single student has a gift. Every single student comes with talents and passion and brilliance. How are we building on that and relating to their experiences? Most of the students now, most of the children now are being born into a world where they're what we call digital natives, right? They're being born in a time where the internet is up and running, the apps are up. I mean, they don't know a time when we did not have internet and access to data in the way we do today. How are we building on those things and drawing those out and helping to prepare them for the future? All right. And then also providing, meeting students where they are. So gone also are the days of just teaching every child the same thing. They're going to be coming back to school in September and October, having different experiences, having different levels of access. So we're going to have to meet them where they are and be creative and innovative to use different approaches to make sure we're trying to reach all the students in the best way possible. And also teaching to their different learning modes. Some kids may learn better by hearing, some learn better by doing, some learn better by seeing. So making sure we're touching on all of those things in the present day culture and the youth culture. All right. And I'm just going to end with a quote. Many of you have heard this quote before. And it's an old time Jamaican quote that says, "We look about with Talawa," right? So we're 2.7 million people in Jamaica in the Caribbean region. It's a small region, but we're so strong in the world, right? To me, and to many other people, the determination, the ingenuity, the internal strengths of people in the Caribbean are unmatched. We can do so much with so little. And we have to be able to take that same ingenuity and apply it to a different way of thinking and a way of making sure we're reaching more students, right? So just building on our strengths. All of you that are in here today, again, I'm glad to see you. You all have exactly what it takes to move our children from this moment that they're in now into the future, and to ensure that every child is getting exactly what they need. We have the strength, we have to pull from the strengths of our ancestors and our and just all of that wisdom and that brilliance that is just in us to be able to move to the next level. So I appreciate you. I know all of you are going to do a phenomenal job. And again, thank you for having me here this evening.
Oh, wow. Mr. Henry, you know I'm going to load you up. Sorry. So, Shauna, excellent points. You had we call them forms back in Jamaica, the grade 11 supervisor on this call, the illustrious and very well-known Mr. Henry from my former high school. And he has posed the first question. Mr. Henry was one of those formidable supervisors that gave students agency before we even knew what the term agency really meant and could have done. Not to mention, he was a boom physics teacher, right? So, Mr. Henry, please pick up yourself. I'm so happy that you're on this call. And yes, you actually asked the first question for the panel, and I do want to echo it. So right before we get to that, and I do have it, we're gonna not yet unmute the microphones for everyone, but we will. And Mr. Henry in particular, I would love if you could ask the question. But I do want to summarize from our panelists that we've heard from, 3 very innovative, from widening perspectives towards the culture, right? And giving us literally tangible, helpful tips, processes, strategies that each of our teachers and veteran or new, and I think Shauna, what you said is so right. And I don't think a lot of us have thought about it that way. Many of us are starting at this 1-year kind of novice teacher experience all over again. I had veteran teachers that I was teaching, and it was the more novice teachers who were taking the reins and working like what Keisha had asked us to do in more collaboration, right? And teaching our more senior teachers how to use the various platforms and how to pivot. And you saw collaboration in a way that they said that they had never. So our grade 6 teachers, for example, collectively got together. Those who had those sound principles and curriculum and lessons and everything really came together, but handed them off to the novice teachers to kind of put up on the Google Classroom, to set up the platforms that the teachers could now access with their parents. Some of us who are teaching are also parents and guardians, and that double role is not lost, especially on us who are playing the canteen lady, the school lunch lady, the nurse, the dentist, the teacher, the principal, etc. More than ever before, about showing up is that our parents and our guardians are being called upon in a way that they've never had to be called upon. They are now acting as the vice principal, the principal, and more importantly, ladies and gentlemen, the dean of discipline. That role there is being called upon more importantly in our households. And then you're looking at the flattening of the bureaucracy of the schools, that our schools hierarchy have had to flatten because our novice teachers are becoming the ones with the expertise in the Zoom, in the glass, in the WhatsApp, in the messaging, in converting the Word documents to PDFs. And so it is not lost on us that these things are, one, taking a toll on us and requiring much more of us to plan and design these curriculum and keep ahead. I think, Shauna, you asked a great question about the curriculum, and this is where Mr. Henry's question comes into play. I have to call him Mr. Henry. Can you imagine? Oh, I can't do it. I think, Nicole, when you said it about our teachers that we remember, I mean, he was never a strict teacher, but he was such an impactful teacher, right? And so it is very nice to have heard from him. And so at this point, Kamika, you are controlling our microphones. I would like, if Mr. Henry, if you're comfortable, you've never been shy. You've always been bold. So I don't see you being any different. If you could ask your question and elaborate a little. I think it's a powerful question coming from you. It's expected. You are always very student-centered, very student-driven. And so, Mr. Henry, you're being asked to raise your hand in the side panel. If you could just click that, and then Kamika will identify you and she will unmute your microphone. So if you could go ahead and do that, that would be great. I will elaborate. I will mention his question and I'll still give him an opportunity while he's raising his hand to do that. But his question was, should students decide what they want to learn? And I think that was echoed from Shauna's point the most. But I want us to keep in the frame of mind of standardized exams, especially in the context of the Caribbean, that we have some of the most numerous number of standardized exams than anywhere else across the globe. We start standardized exams from students are in, I know my teachers in Jamaica will tell me no, but the GOLP is not one. So the grade 1 learning profile is not one, but it's standard to me in some ways. However, at grade 3 diagnostic tests that the children do in grade 3 is there. We got rid of grade 4 and we have that. No, we didn't get rid of grade 4. We substituted it now with 3 years of PEP. We have a lot of standardized exams. If you're in Trinidad, it's the same thing. They have a lot of standardized exams, right? And so many people will ask and question, how can we pivot from the standard curriculum to teach to the students' wants and needs? And I would open it to the panel. Oh, he did wave his hand, Kamika. It's up there right now. So if you could unmute his microphone. Perfect timing. Mr. Henry?
Yes, how are you doing? Good to see you.
Oh, I would give you a virtual hug and kiss right now if I could. It is great to see you.
It's so wonderful to hear from you. But you've been asking my question. We're tied now with these standardized tests. We are forced to teach to a curriculum. So, but it could be that I'm teaching, for example, forces. What aspect of forces would you like to learn today? How do you like me to approach it? Sometimes we need to give the kids a chance to lead us along. We want to be leaders all the time, but sometimes the best teachers are really the best followers. That's my input.
Absolutely, Mr. Henry. And so, this is the kind of teaching that you got, by the way. So and it wasn't the common, it was an anomaly. So he would always be the rebel one with the rest of us. So any of our panelists, please chime in. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. And I think many of our teachers, Mr. Henry is a senior veteran, right? So he can do this without the backlash. I think most of our novice teachers have the exact same question, but are probably, just be honest, fearful of trying to do that. So what are ways that we could do this, but still meet the standards?
So,
Shauna, you want to take it?
all right, you can start first. Thanks.
Okay. So Mr. Henry, thank you so much for adding your input there. I think you gave us a nice frame for how we could go about having children direct their learning, because it could be within a particular context of the curriculum, right? You can give them a topic and then they can ask those questions that may help them to understand that topic more deeply. I think very often when we're following curriculums, what tends to happen is we're teaching what's going to be on the test, right? And we aren't really necessarily giving the students an opportunity to go really deep on something. So if they're able to direct their own learning and learning how to, the skill of asking a deep question in terms of research, because that's a skill that they will need post-primary, post-secondary. They're going to need those skills. How do I research something? How do I ask a question that is not just a yes or no question? How do I validate my sources? Where do I get that information from? So I think as much as it is connected to the content, that's great. But I think we can also look at the skills that students are garnering as they are doing that work of answering the question in terms of directing their learning.
Yeah, totally agree. Definitely agree with that. And I'll add, I think that you can maintain the same standard and be able to get to it different ways, right? So for example, if you're in physics teaching force, you don't have to do it just by the way the textbook is saying, but the same standard students can still learn through something that's related to their lives or relevant to their lives or the culture, right? And I'm also gonna say, I know you didn't really ask about the standardized tests, but I'm just gonna plug this because I'm not there, so I can say it and I don't have to answer to anyone there. But we have to look at our standardized tests measuring what we want students to know. Our standardized tests helping us get students where they need to be in this 21st century with the jobs and all the other opportunities that's available right now. Are those getting us where we need to be for students, or are they just the standard and they've been there, so we're doing them over and over? So that's my little piece on that.
I want to say, finger snap, Shauna, absolutely. You know, we could spend a whole nother Zoom interrogating and poking holes in, you know, the problems within the standardized teaching and learning in the Caribbean. But what I do want to say is, in direct response to the question is, I feel like it sits nicely under the topic of differentiation, right? So if we think about differentiated teaching practices, a lot of times we normally just tend to think about differentiating how we teach, right? But we have to remember as practitioners, there are lots of ways that we can differentiate, you know, in the classroom. We can differentiate our content. We can, you know, include additional topics outside the curriculum. We have to be very smart and strategic about the way that we do that, but we can do it. We can differentiate the process, right? Meaning the way that we're teaching the information, and we can differentiate the product, the way that we're expecting students to, like, you know, spit back to us and demonstrate content mastery. So I would say, like, in the realm of, like, with all the constraints of, like, having to teach to the test and time limits and resource limits, I think really if we think about differentiating products, there's a lot of promise there. You know, a lot of times we tend to only think of very, very formal, boring ways of assessing student knowledge, right? And it's usually only assessing content knowledge, often not skills. We're not often tapping into skills. So we tend to think about, you know, we teach a topic, so have a quiz, or have a test, write a paper, right? What about more creative arts projects where they're getting to, like, you know, infuse their love of arts or media, you know, or different forms of presenting. PowerPoint is not the only way to actually present information in this day and age. You know, there's so many other different kinds of tools. Are we giving students the opportunity to use a video, you know, performance, you know, just different ways of expressing themselves. Assigning a project with, like, was an extension topic, you know, that you didn't teach, but you really wanted to tap into, and you give students the opportunity to do some additional research and present it to the class now. So I think within the scope of differentiated practice, there's a lot of promise, and we have to kind of, like, you know, remember that and not forget that. We need to dip into that teaching toolkit and remember we have some options about the ways that we can engage with our students each and every day.
I have a slew of questions popping up, so I'm going to give it to the panelists. If you guys could just jot down notes so we can try to get to as many of them in the time allotment. One is going to be by Antoinette Wyatt, which has caused some nice heated dynamic in the session. I love it. The comment is, the seasoned Jamaican teachers fight change and find it hard to pivot. It is really the younger teachers who are launching out. Any recommendations on how we can integrate the curriculum in a way that encourages even the seasoned teachers to embrace this change? There is a Mrs. Walters at the bottom, which I think I may have gone through her as well, who had hit back I think very respectfully saying that we mustn't generalize, because there are seasoned teachers who have been pivoting and are very dynamic in their teaching aptitude and ability to change and adapt to change. So I want to point that out there. There is also the request for recommendations on methods, assessment methods that could be utilized, or different types of assessment methods that we can utilize within these changes on these current times. Because let's face it, when we stopped in March, a lot of us had to go buy some printer ink, because the amount of paper we were being asked to print out for these children to complete and upload, and then we could get to the schools to take home the books. It was crazy. But now we're thinking of more ingenious ways, to be quite honest with you, about assessment, especially through those of us who are doing the PEP, the primary school curriculum, and tests, standardized tests, and ways in which we're looking at household stuff to make trashables into teachables, right? You can coin that. Dr. Kincaid Clark in the early childhood taught me that one. So any assessment methods, okay? Let me try to get to a couple more. And while you think about that, your responses, okay? Boring ways of assessment. Again, assessment's a big one. This is a hot topic one. Do you believe that the curriculum needs to change? Okay. I will give our panelists just a little bit of context. Our new standards curriculum in Jamaica was started a couple of years ago and has been in full implementation phase. Our PEP standardized exam has been interrupted quite a bit, but it has only had it has not had a full cohort to go through. Meaning my daughter's age was from grades 4, 5, and 6 that should have gone through, and they got interrupted due to COVID. So they were not able to sit the grade 5 exam. The other piece about this, which is the big question mark from a secondary teachers, is CXC. Now CXC controls essentially our grades 10 and 11 and 12 and 13 curriculum for the large and the most part of the secondary curriculum, right? And that's a standardized machine. Do not get this twisted. This is a standard machinery, right? And it had great intentions when they started up in 79, very independent for the region and giving us more culturally, contextually relevant curriculum and syllabi that was born out of the Caribbean, right? And needed, rather than doing the O-level exams from the United Kingdom, from Britain in particular. So we know that. However, today in particular, as we are using it, there's a lot of questions about, for example, the daunting SBAs. And I know a lot of teachers that I was teaching right up to July that were tearing their hair out at trying to collect SBAs from the students at home. In remote areas, non-remote areas, it was a daunting process because the waiting for the SBAs were higher than even the multiple choice exams when they were sitting there. And so they were gaining much more traction. There's a lot of debate about that and what it took out of our teachers, to be quite honest with you, for them to get. And I'm sure there are going to be better plans put in place. But it was very daunting. And so I'll leave it at that. And I'm going to go through the various chats while you guys speak some truth and knowledge to our participants. Kimiko, you're going to have to unmute the mics for Shauna. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Nicole, did you want to start, Dr. Grimes?
No, you can go ahead, Shauna.
Okay. So, not being as familiar with the exact curriculum, I can speak more in general terms. I think curriculum should always be living. So it should never be stagnant or static, but ever changing, right? And so even units, curriculum, it shouldn't be something, you shouldn't be able to go back to the same document from 10 years and open it up and teach them that same thing, because we're not 10 years ago. It's ever changing And so it should be, to me, curriculum documents should be living and just always adapting to what we're going through, either in the times or something, you know, for the future. It just should be, it shouldn't be stagnant. So should it change? Yes. I don't know the exact curriculum you have right now. It sounds like you just updated it. And it sounds like I've heard, you know, Jamaica did a wonderful job. It's been internationally acclaimed, that new curriculum. So it sounds like it has been updated, but we just have to continue looking at it and always examining and seeing what else we need to put in, what should we take out, and just continue changing it as we go, or adjusting, I should say.
I guess I can add that I want to echo Shauna's sentiments. I think that we should never think about curricula as static, you know, documents. They should be dynamic documents. And if we're talking about a recently updated curricula for the island, then I would imagine that that necessitates some updated teaching practices and approaches and strategies, you know, to teach this new content. I think a lot of times what gets lost in the sauce, so to speak, is when we think about curriculum, we tend to focus on the content piece. And the skills piece gets overlooked so much. And we have to remember, while it is wonderful if we could have any secondary school student stand up and tell you the significance of every color of the flag and what happened in 1792 and whatever, while we could be very proud about the, you know, our students' ability to regurgitate large volumes of information, we really, really need to ask ourselves, are we equipping our students with the skill set, with the actual skills for success beyond secondary schooling? Because isn't that the game plan? Isn't every student who is in a secondary school in the Caribbean, we hope and dream that they will make it into an institution of higher learning, a tertiary institution? So we really should be consistently asking ourselves, are our kids ready to go abroad, or even, you know, of course, enroll in UE and other local institutions and excel? Are we equipping them with the tools to excel in tertiary education? For me, that's the bottom line. Not so much, you know, how many people and places and stories you have to remember in the curriculum. And I think an annex point is something that I've discovered too with like leading a school, a high-performing school here in the United States, is that this is a touchy one, but I have to say it. A lot of times when we have students, right, and they're doing well, we think that their excellence and their success is because of us in the classroom. And sometimes the truth of the matter is our students excel despite us. Because students who are capable will go on Khan Academy, they will have their WhatsApp chat group, they will go research things, they will figure it out to compensate for our deficits in the classroom. So let us not be so big-headed and broad-shouldered that we think that there's no changes needed, you know, in terms of how we actually teach our students, because our students overall do well. We have to ask ourselves, well, why, how, you know, and what are the gaps? You know, we can never ever be in this profession and think that there is nothing additional that needs to be interrogated or poked or changed. So,
all right, we have less than 5. We're actually over. So Keisha, you want to just give us some final thoughts and I'll close us out.
Yeah, final thoughts. Essentially, curriculum does not teach kids. Teachers teach kids.
Boom.
And I think that is critical for us to identify. As I think about scholars like Zaretta Hammond, she's an author of Culturally Responsive Teaching and the Brain. She asserts that the achievement gap manifests itself when we are creating dependent learners. So when Dr. Grimes just mentioned that, you know, kids being able to memorize something rote, that's not where it's at. My Brooklyn is coming out. That's not where it's at, right? It really is about teaching kids how to do the critical thinking so that they therefore become independent learners. And so that's really important. We can have the curriculum, but the curriculum is not teaching the kids. It is us. We're the ones who are teaching the kids. So what are we doing to ensure that we're teaching them in a way that they develop these skills to be independent?
Keisha, you're getting bare level up. So let's just be real. Let's just round this off. Listen, we all have what it takes to pivot into this next step, okay? The Caribbean teachers we know are some of the most highly sought after in the world, where they heavily recruit us. We literally know how to make lemonade out of stone. Okay, we have overcrowded classrooms, very limited resources, and somehow we still outperform and overperform. We get a curriculum today, we pivot it to tomorrow, all right? And now we're being asked for many other things on top of that. One of the things that I think if we would take away is not just how we show up ready, but how we give ourselves grace during this time period. Less is so much more on an online platform. So whereas we used to try to cover the entire syllabus, CXC syllabus in, in less than the time allotted just to get through the SBAs and work through the extra lessons. Less is much more. We are more exhausted on online spaces actually than when we are face-to-face. And more importantly, we are working with less optimal. I hope most of you, is 187 of us on this platform right now. And most of you didn't conk out and join back in. So the flow was doing well. And Digicel on point. And you never get a light lock off either. Because it's there that we went through when we were pivoting between March and July in particular. And so as we reach into whether we open up in September or whether we open up in October, and whether that is virtual or face-to-face, what will remain consistent is the following. We were the best of the best regardless, and that's something that we must know. We have what it already takes to keep us empowered. We need to become more emotionally in tune. I will say that we sometimes like to be islands on our own, but we can't be. Yes. And we need our community to form greater collaboration than we have ever had to have needed before. With that, I want to thank you all, but I really want to big up the panelists. I think what you have done for our participants in the Caribbean and across the globe is more than we could have gotten in a 90-minute segment, and how we're able to do that is somewhat unbelievable as well. Thank you guys for the strategies, the tips. I will make sure that Renee has the additional ones that I have typed up so that we can send them off to JTC, and the teachers, the participants will send them through your link. And this recording, this session has been recorded as well, so that you guys can gain access to it. Thank you so much. There is never enough time when we are just about to get ripe with the learning and the lesson. And so with that said, thank you again. Please walk good, keep safe, and just keep blessed and keep faith and keep energized for this school year about to start. All right, Renee, we'll just see you sign on. All right. All the best, everyone. Take care. Kimika, you want to send us out or send us off? Thank you, panelists, so much.